Good evening, YouTube. My name is Todd. I am the Progressive Mystic. This will be my fourth video that I've uploaded to this channel, if I manage to get through it. And for those who haven't seen the first three, which is almost all of the human race outside of a handful of people, these first series of videos are supplementary videos to an upcoming debate on the existence of God I'm going to be having with Ben Burgis, the YouTube commentator, academic philosopher extraordinaire. He is an atheist, agnostic, whatever, pretty strong agnostic, if not an atheist, and he will be arguing against. I will be arguing for. We've discussed the debate twice on emails. He confirmed a few weeks ago, and I haven't followed up in a little bit because I have been a little under the weather. I've had problems with a cough, and voice hasn't been great. And, it didn't hurt to have a little more time to do some research. In any case, let's get into this video, which will be on the topic of what we call metaethics. Metaethics and arguments for the existence of God. Metaethics is as distinguished from ethics proper, sometimes called practical ethics, is the theoretical aspect, the metaphysical, if you will. How are we going to ground our this idea of right or wrong or good or bad metaphysically? In what sense is it really wrong? Is it really wrong to do something bad, or is it just sentiments, for example? And as opposed to practical ethics, ethics proper, perhaps you might say, which would be like, should I help the old lady across the street, or go rescue the young kid who's about to get hooked on crack? Gotta make a decision. I don't know if those are great examples. Often there'll be maybe like your kids are drowning in the pool and your kid's one of them, but there's another one closer. Should you risk it to save your own kid? You have special duties, for example, is a topic. Practical ethics. And I have to admit, I'm not terribly interested in practical ethics. I think it ends up being a lot of, dilemmas that necessarily don't come up. And I think you can really address the core of these issues in like politics and philosophy of law, political philosophy of political theory, and so I am interested in metaethics, though, because I'm into metaphysics and the notion of like valuative concepts. Sometimes they're called good, bad, right, wrong, are important for reality and for how we live in this world. And hey, look at that, I got some company here, kitty cat. So, metaethics. How can I best explain this for newcomers? Maybe you've heard, like, I've heard this before. I heard this on the job a few years ago. Heard somebody say, like, somebody who's a Christian or theist. They come across somebody who says they don't believe in God, and the Christian might say, "What? You don't believe in God? Like, where do you get your morals? Or how can you be moral? How can you have morality without God? And it just seems intuitive. And personally, obviously, it'll be like, well, usually, of course I can. I know right and wrong, and typically both people kind of feel these strong intuitive pulls, and towards you need God for morality, or towards screw you, I don't, right? But most people aren't philosophers. Don't get down and break down exactly what's behind these like intuitions. So that's what I'm here for. And so what I see going on here is three things, maybe two, maybe the third will be a subset of the first one of the two, but let's say three intuitions behind this sentiment that you need God for morality, right? Number one, called the metaethical, metaphysical, right? Like this need that you need God to ground your morality in some sort of objectivity, right? It's not just bad to, murder somebody in cold blood, because like we feel bad about it. It's bad because like, God holds it to be bad, and that makes it objectively bad, right? This need that we don't want to get committed to some sort of like moral anti-realism or like relativism, which is just gonna say who's to say who's right or wrong. It's all relative. Maybe it's okay to murder this culture, which starts flirting with anti-realism, which is just to say, hey, morals, they're not really moral truths don't really exist, and you need to deal with that. Most people don't want to go with that. Even most academic philosophers, from what I've seen in surveys, like 62%. The last survey I saw were moral realist. So it's a problem. Moral realism is a problem, as we'll see, because this metaethical, metaphysical problem. And like in contemporary philosophy, for example, they're really concerned how we can do this. Say some things have value and morals be consistent with the understanding of the naturalist world, physicalist world. Sometimes they say where just matter and physical laws and that's it, right? How do we get ethics into that picture, right? That's a big question, whether or not you can do it. But for now, this God issue, this is people think you might need it, and there's this intuition behind it. Big problem with it we're going to get to. But that's number one, right? Second intuition is, I'll say, behind this need that you need God for morality, consequences, right? Like you want to talk about like God going to punish you or reward you, right? Especially in the afterlife, right? People often beliefs in God go along with beliefs in the afterlife, and you do good things, could go well for you. You do bad things, it's going to go poor for you. And these consequences are critical, right? And, people in this life too, of course. People, a big part of religion and most of human history was, praying for stuff now in the human world, right? We do sacrifice to the gods, so the crops come, right? And this is something people still do. Right? I've been told many times they're praying to God, and God came and I got a check in the mail. I made my rent, So part of religious practice, the consequences. You want to be good, get the rewards. Now this is a problem for ethics, in that really, if you want to analyze something that's really morally blameworthy or praiseworthy and admirable. Right? Somebody really does something moral, you want to say they do it, consequences be damned, right? And this idea has its roots in Plato's Republic. This is where you get this big challenge to the idea that justice is worth having for its own sake and not for its consequences, right? Not for its reputation among the living, and for consequences with the gods in the afterlife, right? This is Plato's brothers, Glaucon and Adeimantus, bring up these objections, and the rest of the Republic is Socrates trying to show them that justice is indeed worth having for its own sake, and he does this by showing that, in short, that if you really got your soul together, right, in a way where what's really good for you and what's really going to make you happy, and beyond that flourish, right, and benefit in the greatest possible way, well, that's going to coincide with treating people justly. Right, it's all going to go together, and a big part of that is because you're not going to be like a greedy jerk. You're going to be like just into contemplating the forms, doing philosophy, not have this like big thirst for wealth, power, luxury, right? And beyond that, Socrates in the Republic, he introduces this objective standard as the supreme principle of all, right? Like foundation for the cosmos, presumably, and presumably explicitly, but also the foundation for intelligibility, right? For how we can even have intelligible ideas we can talk about, right? It's all ultimately rooted in the good, sometimes called the idea of the good, and there may or may not be a distinction between the two. I think there probably is, but that's a topic for another video. But the supreme principle, the good, apparently Plato links it up with the one. Got to make kind of an exegetical argument from the text, and maybe even like a historical critical one. But these by doing this, by introducing this the good in this way, what Socrates is able to show is not only does it serve as kind of an answer to why it's best to have justice, because your justice is having justice like in your own soul is going to put you in context with the supreme good, right? So you're going to know what's good, right? Because you're going to have the good, it's knowledge of the good as a paradigm, and compare the world, act accordingly with it, and that's going to make you and everybody around you as like righteous and happy and good as possible. And so you get this like kind of, I guess you might say, like your own interest aligned, right? In Socrates' answer, this is kind of sometimes called like virtue ethics, as opposed to deontological rules-based ethics, or consequentialist ethics, which derives your ethical answers purely by the consequences of them. Virtue ethics looks at virtues like courage, justice, wisdom, and on like inner self-development, as opposed to particular decisions. So, and Plato's Republic, therefore, you get this: the good is a supreme metaphysical entity, if you will, that serves as this foundation for ethics. All right. Consequences be damned. However, even though and Socrates does show this, I think that better to be just, in this life, consequences be damned. Question of the afterlife comes in, and that's even the next level. You're not getting any rewards, but still, right? I think he shows that. But what Socrates also wants to show in the Republic is the universe, presence of justice in the universe, and this is something we want to see too, right? Even if it's true, which it is true, that it is maybe morally praiseworthy to stand up for justice, rewards, consequences be damned, including the afterlife, right? Like Adeimantus, Socrates' brother, says, what if you can trick the gods? Like the gods, the poets say, and you can just do sacrifices, Beginning of the Republic, this fellow Cephalus, this rich guy, appears to be trying to do something like that. Maybe he's a shady businessman now. He's sacrificing up to the gods all the time, trying to appease them, then perhaps according to certain readings of the text, including my own. But if you trick the gods, then you can get away with it all, well, Socrates goes to show this, you got the wrong idea of the gods. The gods aren't like the poets say. Gods are good. You're not going to be doing in bad shape by being good, having your soul in good order, because that's just going to make you, right, like the gods, if you will. And some things are going to be good for you, and you do get your just rewards. But that's a separate question from what makes things good. That's a question for, right, how pervasive is the good, right? Are we the only ones that know about it, right? There's few like human beings in this solar system, perhaps galaxy. I don't know if there's any other moral agents out there. What'd you like out, kitty? My cat trapped in my room right now. Maybe I should let him out. Come on. Now, what made that a good or bad decision for my cat? I care about my cat, his well-being. Well, we're going to get into it. We're going to get into it. So, 3 intuitions behind this sentiment. How can you be moral without God? Number 1, metaethical, metaphysical, right? God ground objective morality, right? Not just be matter of human opinion, right? God's going to make the rules, and that's going to make it objective and standard, right? Then that second one, the consequences. And as I just showed, the consequences don't really need it for objective morality, because it seems like you're really moral if you do it. Consequences be damned. Whereas if you do it for the rewards, or even knowing you're thinking you're getting rewards, it's maybe, ulterior motives, right? Not just doing it, purely for the principle itself, which seems to be, still maybe praiseworthy, but maybe somewhat less so. However, consequences do matter for the overall picture of the universe, which is important for the argument for the existence of God, because if we can show rewards of justice, right, in this grander cosmic scale, maybe you can make a better argument that there's a benevolent, intelligent designer behind it all, right? So, 1 and 2 there, metaethical, metaphysical / consequences. Number 2, and then number 3, I'm going to call here the spiritual, religious, mystical experience, right? And I think some people, they've had maybe some sort of religious experience, or they know somebody who has, and it motivated like a certain change for the better in their moral behavior. Now this could of course get twisted, right? Someone could like have a religious experience and convert to some fundamentalist thing, and then all of a sudden think they like give up, I don't know, like being gay or something, and they think they're being moral now, and even though they're, I don't know, supporting like Republicans who just want to cut taxes for the rich and cut social services for the poor, and so like it's not so simple. I really like point to, I think it was like the near-death experiences is a example, and people have secular experiences, just change of heart to become moral too. You don't have to have God. But, the spiritual experience is an intuition for many people, I think, that this is how we can make sense of morality. That you can't have morality without God, because you need, maybe to have some sort of turnabout of the heart, to really be moral. So, these 3 intuitions, all right, so there's a problem with 2, although it's still important for the grander scale, that you really don't need consequences to be moral. Consequences don't really even detract if you're doing it for consequences, like for your own consequences, and then this, as far as the metaethical, metaphysical goes, that is where we get to the Euthyphro dilemma, Euthyphro problem for the, might call the divine command theory, with this idea that you have God, that he makes the rules, right, and that gives them objective morality, right? They're objectively moral because God commanded them. And there we have it, right? Now I know what to do. And it's objective, it's true, it's not just an opinion, and it's a reliable approach, and I can be ethical according to this, right? And whether it's 10 commandments or, whatever set you want to come up with and derive, whether through, rational, like, reflection, and think this is what God would think, but usually it's from religious texts, the 10 Commandments, of course, being one example. People want to put a lot more, and Jesus just has the 2. Right? Love God with your whole soul and mind, and strength and heart, and to love thy neighbor as thyself, right? And then it's pretty much you stick to those 2, you're good with Jesus. However, they Christians, theists usually like to add more, right? And they think it's, it's grounded in the Bible, like, don't be gay. Paul says right here, and that's the divine command theory, right? Problem with the divine command theory is this Euthyphro objection, which comes out of the Plato's dialogue, the Euthyphro, where this fellow Euthyphro thinks he knows what piety is. Socrates, of course, wants to be taught by him. Oh, piety. Teach me piety. Define it. Tell me what it is. And he says, yeah, it's easy. Euthyphro says, piety. That's what the gods love. That which is beloved by the gods. That's the pious. That's piety. And Socrates is like, oh, that's interesting. So, is it pious because the gods love it? Does that make things pious? Or does God love the pious because it's pious? Does God love pious things because they're worthy of his love by vis-a-vis being pious? Right? So the Euthyphro dilemma. You take the first horn of the dilemma, that pious, they're just pious and God loves them. It's like, well, seems like it could be arbitrary, right? There's no principle, no rational principle. It's just God loves it, therefore it's pious. But what if God, loves pious things that aren't just? For example, something that that would seem counterintuitive, right? Well, he's free to do so in this instance if it's just purely because of his preference, right? It can't be arbitrary, we want to say anyway. That's the problem with that horn of the dilemma. Now you take the other horn of the dilemma and say that God loves the pious because they're pious, because they're worthy of being loved. Then you have another principle involved, right? You have got to explain it, right? Like why? What is it about the pious that makes God love him, right? Why is the pious good, right? So what is the pious? What is this thing that God loves? Explain it to me, right? And now this comes into play in a number of different ways in philosophy, religion, and metaethics. And I think it's underappreciated, actually, what Socrates is doing in this segment. It's really, I think it underpins Plato's metaphysics and approach. However, I'm gonna just for now, I want to just show how this works in terms of the divine command theory, right? And the question becomes are God's commands, are they good because God commands them, or does God command them because they're good? You take the first horn of the dilemma that God, they're good because God commands them. It seems arbitrary, ad hoc, right? We don't have any reason, right? We just yes sir, right? You take the other horn of the dilemma and you have a further principle to explain, right? It's okay. Well, tell me about if God's commands are he does them because they're good. Tell me about this goodness, right? Explain it to me. What's the reason they are good, right? And this, maybe reason, right? You're going to maybe refer to some sort of principle, or in Plato, form. It's called, right? Of goodness, right? This is objectively good, right? And it's the reason why you should do good things, right here, and and God loves it. That's why God loves it. Okay, so this is it's a tough objection to the divine command theory. The way they usually respond, and the most common response, most powerful response, is to say, well, you don't need to separate the goodness from God's nature. It's in God's nature to be good. And so it's, it's like a false dilemma, right? And one could counter and say, well, what if God commanded something unjust? He commanded it to still be good. There's a contradiction there. And the divine commanders come back and say, no, God would never do that because he is necessarily good and wise and all-knowing, right? And so his commands are necessarily good and just, right? And then come back and say, well, what do you mean necessarily? And they argue over this, and it's a good argument. I don't think I don't think it works for the theist, the divine command theorist. Ultimately, for the main reason that you just say that, okay, fine, necessary, whatever. God isn't adding anything to the objective value, right? He's backing it up. He agrees with us, right? But the objective worth of the good, right? The reason God loves it, the reason he commands it, right? It stands as an objective fact that God recognizes, and it's eternal, it's timeless, it's spaceless, right? This is something that's you might say it's divine company, if you will, right? If indeed God is commanded, making his commands based on this good principle, sometimes called abstract object, right? Goodness, right? So divine command theory doesn't work. It's I guess you might say that I said it already. These things can be known, analyzed without reference to God, right? Maybe you could say God might help with access, to these abstract objects, if you will, which is like a big problem, like Platonic metaphysics. For those of you who'd like to know more about Platonic metaphysics, you might have a video on the topic. Platonism and contemporary Platonism and arguments for the existence of God, I believe, my second video. Only got a few. Break that down for those, the uninitiated. But so this divine command theory, it doesn't work. But these three intuitions, right? We need not throw the baby out with the bathwater. Still need this like metaethical, metaphysical, right, whatever, to ground our objective morality, so to speak. So we still are going to talk about goodness, right? And then that's going to need some work. What is goodness, for example? What makes things good? We're going to use our reason to try to figure out that, hammer it out, and if we're successful, maybe we'll come up with some sort of guiding principles. Some might say like categorical imperatives. This is a fancy word from like Immanuel Kant, where it's act is moral if it's universally maximizable. You can will it at all times, right? And take yourself out of the equation doesn't benefit you, right? But what you're doing here is you're trying to reason, find justice, and I would say at some point you're going to have to have reference to some sort of abstract object, Platonic form, right? And this is curiosity in contemporary metaethics. I took this course in 2014, theory of ethics, graduate level ethics at San Diego State when I was in the MA program there. And they just kind of didn't talk about abstract objects, Platonic forms, right? You get the Euthyphro objection early on. You learn divine command theory doesn't work, right? And then when you get into these issues, whether you can do ethics through naturalism or you can't, right? And I'm going to get into that in just a minute here. But they don't really talk about these Platonism like they do, and like, for example, philosophy of like metaphysics with like mathematics. Platonism is, I think, the dominant position in like philosophy of mathematics, right? Because it doesn't need it for science, and just seems gotta have it. Seems to be real, and even in broader respects, the other broader range of abstract objects, like for example, sets, possible universes, sentence structures, right? Of course, it's traditional abstract objects, like whiteness or whatever, goodness, doesn't seem to be one that everybody's into, right? And goodness, right? And evaluative concepts, if you will, isn't something like being like heavily, I guess I want to say, hotly debated in metaethics, the metaphysical standing of these, or existence of these, from what I've seen. It was an awkward moment in class when the teacher was trying to explain how they kind of do this meta-ethical, rational, I guess you will, objective grounding. And, you see like Shelley Kagan do this in this debate with William Lane Craig. And what they'll do is they'll say, well, we can kind of imagine a perfectly rational agent, what they might do, say, yeah, these principles of such an agent, maybe probably exist, and therefore we can kind of assume an objective reality from that sense. And my J. Angelo Corlett, my ethics professor at San Diego State, a renowned scholar and author and an editor of Journal of Ethics, right? He's into this stuff, right? Really into this stuff. He was, basically doing a reversion of this, although I think he said God instead of a perfectly rational agent, but kind of showing how he had to go through this process to arrive at this kind of rational approach to objective morality. And somebody said in the class, raised his hand, he said, but wouldn't that imply there's some sort of Platonic forms? And Corlett looks at him, like, if I can do the look, batted his eyes at him, like to say, like, you're onto something, yes, yeah, but also, like, yeah, we just kind of don't go there. Honest look, and it didn't get explored further. I brought it up in office hours, and he kind of had a laugh over it, and he just then even he kind of just demurred from the conversation and the topic, and I think it's kind of tacitly acknowledged. Yeah, there's this elephant in the room, like this Platonic realism, like in an equivalent sense. It's already been kind of widely accepted by many philosophers in mathematics and other abstract objects at large, but there's this weird thing in metaethics where they want to be naturalist and avoid it, right? And I have a quote here to demonstrate this point. I got this from a book by John Rist, who wrote one of the few authors to really kind of defend a robust Platonic realism. And let me find it here. From this journal, what was it called? Philosophical Review, 1992. Is that Darwell, Gibbard, and Relton? The quote is, now that Platonic ethical intuitionism has lost its following, we no longer need an abstract realm that is independent of human capacities and interests, right, to do like metaethics, right? Which, if you transfer this over to just how metaphysics at large, metaphysics of universals, for example, you're talking about, it sounds like they're doing like Aristotelian, like eminent realism, which does not work in mathematics at all, because like set theory isn't like eminent in the physical world, this eminent approach. It's got other problems too. I don't have time to get into them, but people don't really take it seriously now. But here these guys in 92 are kind of seem to be endorsing it implicitly, right? In this like article, like, basically showing this is the direction metaethics is going in, this anti-Platonic direction. So it's interesting. It's interesting, but I think you can do a lot if you open up and embrace it, and I think it's rational to do so, as I will explain. First off, I want to go over contemporary metaethics. Really takes off with a fellow named G.E. Moore. And he's this guy with these Platonic intuitions that I don't even know if he called himself a Platonic intuition, but he definitely was an intuitionist, and it sounded very Platonic anyway. And these guys, they want to get away from him. Though I'm not sure what Moore's actual statements on Platonism with respect to his position was. But in any case, Moore, he basically rehashed a point already made by Hume, right? Over a century earlier. That is, Hume's point was that you cannot derive an ought from an is, right? That facts, right? They are to be sharply distinguished from values, right? I think Hume said somewhere that someone who believes it's good to blow up the whole, destroy the whole planet or whatever, you can't say they're wrong, just as but I'm not sure if that's true if he said that, but I read it somewhere. It's probably true. But it's fact value distinction. Right, and Hume made this point, it's a good point, and the people ignored him. Most philosophers ignored him. They thought they could do it with nature, man. They thought they could do it. And finally, this G.E. Moore fellow comes along, and he develops this called the open question argument. And he says that, basically for, any fact where you might cast a moral judgment upon, right, the actual just facts of the matter, Frank, killed Henry, with a ball pen hammer, that always going to be a further question whether or not, open question whether or not it's good or bad, as distinct from, whether or not the act itself happened, right? And similar to the fact value distinction. I'm probably not explaining it as well as I should, but not that hard of an approach, right? If you really want to be a naturalist, about the natural world and see things, facts is ultimately coming down to molecules and quarks and whatnot, right? And biochemical interactions and stuff. It's where does the value fit in on all that? It seems like it always a further question to say, oh yeah, it's good, right? But that's going to be above and beyond the facts, right, of the matter. And this argument is very, very influential. G. Moore's open question argument, and this people debated, quite a bit in the 20th century. And a lot of people believed Moore, and they went for this called non-naturalism. And others went for naturalism. They say no, Moore's wrong. We could save it, and among these non-naturalists, some bit the bullet, went Hume's way, and went for basically, morals are really, it's just our sentiments, right? And moral anti-realism, and they'll try to still be good by keeping their sentiments consistent, and thus maybe rational, but ultimately they got to kind of bite the bullet and say they're not really, it's no fact of the matter that, throwing a baby in a trash can because it's crying too loud and you got a headache, there's nothing really wrong about it. It's just, it offends my sensibility. Right? I mean, that's a tough bullet to bite, but if you're really committed, physicalist, naturalist, I think you got a lot of intellectual integrity if you do bite that bullet. To be honest, it's a tough one. It's a toughie. And so you got these non-naturalist, moral realist out there that are shy about being Platonist, and acknowledging that there are objectively, real, timeless, spaceless moral principles or forms, right, that are ultimately determinative of moral truths. You don't need that. I don't need to go that far, but I think at some point you do. some point in your argument, you're going to be implicitly referring at least to some sort of objective concept of value. And if you're going to have your theory hold up, it's going to have to go the Platonic route. You're going to have to say it's real, just like mathematics, right? Just like set theory, that or moral anti-realism, right? And you just go ahead, throw the babies in trash cans. Go ahead, you monsters. Just kidding. So what we want to do here? Yeah, I think I said what I wanted to say. I got some fancy notes written there, but I'm doing a good layman approach so far, I hope, today. So one more thing here. I guess my conclusion is that this like moral realism, right, and right, without acknowledging these like abstract, Platonic realities, goodness, justice, right? They really exist. We're really trying to discover the truth about them, right? Without those, right? I don't think you can do a moral realism. I think you're going to have to refer to something in that sense, minimally, and then maximally this sense that these transcendent goodness, right, Plato talks about, that's very akin to transcendent beauty itself and justice, right? These can be apprehended in this kind of quasi-religious, mystical manner, according to the Platonic dialogues. I discussed this further in the previous video. I encourage you to watch that to get more into it. But this range of experiences, sometimes called mystical experiences, numinous experiences, if experience where the encounter is maybe personal in nature, that's intuited to be like maybe God or theistic. Often they'll be impersonal and just be described in terms of like absolute reality, ultimate reality. I gave an example from James Austin and Zen in the Brain in my previous video, where he's like, yeah, that's ultimate reality exists, it's source of morality. That was his intuition, and I think that's going on in Plato. And I don't think we need to give up on it, right? Like, I'm not going to make this core of my argument with the existence of God. Ultimately, you don't need God, objective reality. And Plato even goes as far have Socrates say in the Phaedrus, says this objective, form of the good, supreme goodness and beauty. These are what make the gods themselves divine, right? The gods themselves are divine because of their knowledge and proximity to these, assimilation to, right? These like fundamental ultimate reality, aspects of ultimate reality. And so you can get a long way without theism. With a robust Platonism, bring in the spiritual forms, make them transcendent and quasi-mystical, and I think you can do a lot more with that than with trying to defend this like religious, certain traditions or whatever, where it's like, okay, like, yeah, you experience it with Jesus, you experience with Krishna, so-and-so experience with, some like shamanic, presence, right? Or, dead uncle or whatever. It's profound experiences of the transcendent, right? I think they're epistemically meaningful, and I think you include them in a robust Platonism. And also, so yeah, they serve as foundation for abstract objects which are real and necessary. And this does not, of course, require God. However, as I have, underlined here, what it is, right? If you accept these Platonic realities, if you will, ranging from a mentalist, abstract, abstract good, abstract value exists in some way, to a more maximum, robust Platonism that, is idea of the good, ultimate reality, knock you on your ass kind of thing. Suggestive of a cosmos in which we might be less surprised to learn there is a God, a creative deity that designed it, rather than a cosmos that is just purely physicalistic, naturalistic, right? What you get, just like robust Platonism, is you get the presence of intelligibility, means, and order, right? And then you bring it in, if you're willing to go in for this like transcendent vision of ultimate reality aspect is meaningful, you bring that in too, right? And you might be less surprised at the existence of God. Now you need one more thing. And it's also Platonic. Got here a pen. I need a pen because I need to write it down because I didn't write it down here. Trying myself. One more thing is you need Platonic principle of immortality of the soul. Oh, it's a big one, eh? Right. So, I'll just try to sneak this in on the end. But, again, don't need God for this, right? But you get, I don't know, man. Immortality's, I want a long time, I mean, the Good Place, anybody's ever seen it? Brilliant comedy, and they get to the end. They raise that question, right, of like immortality, and if maybe there might be a sense when just at very least not know, right? But very 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 robust long life. We're talking like a full experience of the afterlife, a range of from bliss to maybe hellish states if you deserve it, if you're bad or you need it, and then reincarnation, robust reincarnation, coming back probably many times, and there's evidence for that. I'm going to make a video, right, explaining the evidence for quasi-immortality of the soul. Philosophers love the word quasi. We want to hedge our bets. All right. Semi sounds dirty. Quasi-immortality of the soul. Right? You need that. And you get that with all this other stuff, right? If I can do all that, right? First off, you get in the universe that's really nice even without God, right? Like, wow. But you get a universe where maybe you're not surprised. That's what I'm going to be doing. And I'm going to be making a case for all this, right? This is going to be part one of my argument, right? That this Platonism over naturalism or physicalism, right? And everybody gets an off ramp, right? I'm going to say you're a fool. You're wrong. I sharply disagree. You have reasons to consider otherwise if you deny moral realism and the existence of abstract objects, like mathematical the nature and evaluative nature as well as others. But I'm focusing on those two. Need those. I think that's important. And then I'm gonna push the mystical stuff too. Right? Say that the reasons for doubting it are maybe a strong think, right? Which I'm not gonna push that argument here, but maybe I'll bring it up in a debate. Right? We'll go at it. If Ben wants to go there, I'll have something to say on it. So I guess that's it. I do have my top 10 Beatles songs of all times right here, but I'm not going to read that to you. I have to explain that to Ben, why most of these are better than any songs the Stones ever recorded. Yeah, maybe all 10 of them are. I don't know. That's topic for another thing. Hopefully Ben doesn't watch this video to the end to hear that and decide not to debate me. You know, he's got strong feelings about the Stones. So I guess I'm done with this video. So that's morality, metaethics. I will not be using it, a moral argument for the existence of God, but I'm gonna make a little case here for moral realism, Platonic moral realism, and use that along with other factors to bolster a robust case for Platonism, and then use that as like I guess a foundation upon which to make my argument for theism. I don't know if that's the right approach, but might be making some sort of logical mistake. Ben might try in, but it seems the best to me. Even now, it's been over a month now. The approach I came up with in a day still seems the right approach, and so that's how I will go forward. So thanks for listening. Like more, I have other videos to watch. Please feel free to comment in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. I would likely respond. Tell you what an idiot you are if you criticize me. No, I'm just kidding. I guess that's all. I will be signing off now. Good night.